According to the World Bank, a higher proportion of adolescent girls are in school than ever before in sub-Saharan Africa, though the percentage of those who complete secondary education is still dismally low at 42%. Between 2005 and 2008, only 33% of secondary school enrollments were female. Female enrollment into secondary schools were as low as 8% in some countries, but these statistics have exponentially improved. About 20 years ago, the African Union heads of state decided to create a center dedicated to promoting girls' and women's education on the continent. The African Union International Center for Girls and Women's Education in Africa, commonly called the African Union CIEFFA or simply AU-CIEFFA. This decision was birthed from Burkina Faso through an existing organization called the Centre International pour l'éducation des filles et des femmes en Afrique.
C'est en 2001 que le ministre des enseignements secondaires supérieurs de la recherche scientifique du Burkina a pris un arrêté qui nommait une équipe légère composée de 3 cadres et une secrétaire assistante. Voilà ce que l'arrêté comportait, et avec des missions bien précises à accomplir dans le cadre du CIEFFA. Alors, la mission principale, c'était de conduire toutes les activités qui devaient concourir à l'installation et au fonctionnement du Centre international pour l'éducation des filles et des femmes en Afrique. L'intention de créer le CIEFFA a été exprimée par le Burkina Faso auprès de l'UNESCO depuis 1995. Les ministres ont suggéré au Burkina d'introduire auprès du directeur général de l'UNESCO la demande, et c'est en 1999 que l'UNESCO a accédé à ce désir-là et a agréé la demande, et en lieu et place du centre ouest africain, l'UNESCO a ouvert ça à tout le continent en créant le Centre international pour l'éducation des filles et des femmes en Afrique. Et immédiatement à la conférence, la 30e conférence de 1999, le CIEFFA a été inscrit dans le programme, le grand programme 1, qui est le programme éducation de l'UNESCO, axe d'action 2. Et il a été inscrit dans le cadre d'un projet spécial. Voilà, ça a été inséré donc dans ce projet spécial et c'est appelé Centre international pour l'éducation des filles et des femmes en Afrique.
Les programmes phares que nous avons implémentés, au niveau de l'UA-CIEFFA, c'est pendant mon mandat. Il faut dire que c'était déjà, comme c'était la poursuite d'actions déjà engagées. Il fallait donc finaliser ces activités-là. Je peux parler par exemple de la formation. Nous avons aussi d'autres activités sur les échanges d'informations sur l'état de l'éducation des filles et des femmes en Afrique, à travers donc la contribution du CIEFFA au niveau du SIG continental, c'est-à-dire le système d'information et de gestion de l'éducation. Donc nous avons travaillé également avec les communautés économiques, CEDEAO et CAC, toutes les autres communautés économiques de l'Afrique. Et nous avons travaillé également avec, en particulier au niveau national, comme nous sommes basés au Burkina Faso.
The center is based in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. Thanks to these voices who had long understood the problem and sought a solution. The organization is steered by the Special Technical Committee on Education, Science and Technology. It functions as a technical and specialized office under the African Union Commission Department of Education, Science and Technology. The AU decision of 2004 was a major milestone for millions of girls and women in Africa who had often been left out of the education agenda for countless reasons. AUCIEFFA has gone through various metamorphoses and phases. From 2004, when it only existed as a center created by Burkina Faso, to a continental organization.
Dans tous les pays du monde, la gente féminine représente plus de 50% de la population. Donc si dans ce monde moderne, qui est un monde de démocratie et de majorité, nous devons donner prioritairement en fait la voix à la femme. Il faut que la femme participe à tous les niveaux. Déjà, elle participe, mais d'une manière imperceptible. Toute famille connaît le rôle de la mère, le rôle de l'épouse dans la famille. Et la nation est une grande famille et nous devons extrapoler ce rôle-là au niveau de la nation et au niveau du continent, sinon au niveau du monde. Donc j'ai participé à ce processus par conviction et je suis heureux que ce processus ait abouti pendant que j'étais encore en poste à Addis Abeba et nous en voyons les résultats aujourd'hui. Je vous en parlais l'autre jour en disant que le CIEFFA devrait être beaucoup plus connu qu'il ne l'est aujourd'hui parce que, à mon avis, c'est une des institutions les plus importantes de l'Union africaine. Parce que le travail du CIEFFA devrait être perçu, compris et apprécié de tous les Africains.
20 years down the trail, the African Union CIEFFA still has one clear vision: to ensure equitable access, retention, and meaningful achievement in the education of all girls in Africa, including girls with disabilities and the most marginalized.
Girls and women on the continent are estimated to comprise more than half of the entire population. Girls and women's education is therefore a fundamental requirement if Africa is to achieve its development aspirations. In line with the African Union Year of Education 2024, achieving equitable access and retention of girls in educational systems will be a major milestone.
Over the past few decades, there has been steady progress in closing gender gaps in human endowments and opportunities, including girls' access to education.
According to the World Bank, the literacy rate of adult females in sub-Saharan Africa increased to 58.8% by 2019. Many African countries have achieved gender parity in primary education. In 2020, 66% of girls completed their primary education compared to 61% of boys in sub-Saharan region of Africa, according to UNESCO. However, this doesn't mean that we are off the hook. In sub-Saharan Africa, just over 2/3 of girls complete their primary education, and 4 in 10 complete lower secondary education. Girls are still more likely than boys to never set foot in a classroom despite the tremendous progress made over the past 20 years.
The African Union CIEFFA has worked its way through 3 strategic plans from 2015 to 2017, 2018 to 2020, and its current strategic plan on building resilience to foster human capital through girls and women's education for sustainable development from 2021 through to 2025. The center has been able to place major foundation stones in advocating for girls' education on the continent. From publications to major advocacy platforms like the annual high-level dialogue, the Youth Capacity Building Program, the dialogue with traditional and religious leaders, workshops with the Pan-African Parliament, and working sessions with focal points within the ministries in charge of education and gender.
The African Union CIEFFA became a specialized institution of the African Union in 2004 to deal with girls' and women's education following an assembly decision in 2004. It was also a UNESCO 2 Category 2 institution at that time. However, the institution only became operational with African Union Commission staff as from November 2014, when I took the helm of the institution and developed henceforth the first strategic plan for the AU CIEFFA. Since that time, the AU CIEFFA has made a lot of progress in its flagship projects and also is very well known around the world. Focus has been on advocacy at different levels, from the highest policy level to the grassroots levels.
From its inception stage in advocating for girls' and women's education on the continent, the African Union CIEFFA now celebrates the 8th edition of its high-level dialogue, the 5th edition of the Youth Capacity Building Program, with a network of over 250 youth across Africa, and a network of over 55 focal points in 32 member states.
We have different flagship programs, and the first one is the Africa Educate Her campaign, which was now launched by 4 EU member states. The second flagship program is the annual high-level dialogue on gender equality in education, which target various multi-stakeholders and in line with the AU Team of the Year of every year. The third one is the Youth Capacity Building Program, where we engage youth in our work on promoting gender equality in education. And the fourth one is the Alumni Program, still related to champions girls' education by our youth. The other one is also the PAP sitting with the Pan-African parliamentarian discussing on mainstreaming gender equality in the work of parliamentarian on passing laws, for example. And the other one is also our community of practice composed by our different focal points. And those focal points are the experts within Ministry of Education and Ministry of Gender, and those are our focal points with whom we also work. We also have another flagship program which is composed by the traditional and religious leader with whom we try also to work at the community level. And those flagship programs really enable AU CIEFFA, to fulfill its mandate.
In 2024, the Center launched the Africa Educator campaign in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. These advocacy campaigns seek to draw the attention of all stakeholders to the devastating effects of humanitarian situations and emergencies on girls' and women's education. It calls on interested parties to build resilient education systems that can ensure continued learning before, during and after crisis.
La campagne Africa Educator a été lancée depuis septembre 2020 en réponse à la pandémie de la Covid qui était vraiment impactant pour l'éducation de la jeune fille en Afrique. Donc on a décidé de lancer cette campagne-là qui était en quelque sorte une campagne de plaidoyer et aussi une plateforme pour pouvoir permettre aux jeunes filles de faire entendre leur voix, de partager leur expérience et aussi de permettre aux États membres de partager également les stratégies qu'ils ont mis en place pour pouvoir donc faire face à cette pandémie-là et permettre aux jeunes, permettre aux apprenants ainsi qu'aux enseignants de pouvoir continuer à enseigner et aux jeunes de continuer à apprendre.
Its growth has not been without setbacks. The African Union CIEFFA has had its share of challenges.
For us, the first challenge, I will say, is the understanding of AU CIEFFA mission and vision. People think that sometimes AU CIEFFA is a training center where girls who are dropped out of school can come and get some skills opportunities, which is not the mandate of AU CIEFFA. The second challenge, of course, is linked to our budget, because usually, you know, I would say Ministry of Gender and the Ministry of Education are those who usually are getting less budget. And you can see that as AU CIEFFA, we are really facing to this challenge on getting really, you know, concrete budget. The third challenge that is in terms of program, particularly in terms of data. We usually need data, you know, to influence our work, to influence our policies, to prove in front of member states that we have a real issue on girls and women education in different countries. But unfortunately, we are facing of lack of accurate data, particularly gender disaggregated data on girls and women education.
Over the years, the staff of AU CIEFFA has always considered promoting girls and women's education in Africa as a mission rather than just a job.
Je peux dire que je suis l'exemple de ce que vaut l'éducation des filles et la formation des femmes en Afrique. Je suis issu d'une famille de cultivateurs qui peut-être n'eût été un peu une chance, serait resté dans son village, dans son cadre, serait devenu bonne paysanne, etc. Mais le sort heureux en a décidé autrement. Et voilà, je suis quand même très fier de ce que je suis devenu grâce à l'école dans laquelle ma tante m'a mise et a veillé à ce que j'y réussisse. Parce que souvent, ce qui est un peu difficile, on est prompt à laisser les filles aller à l'école. Mais ensuite, que de barrières qui sont mises consciemment ou inconsciemment sur la voie au succès de ces filles qui partent à l'école. Donc, j'estime que l'école, en deux phrases, l'école, pour reprendre les propos de Nelson Mandela, c'est l'arme la plus puissante pour changer le monde. Et moi, j'ajouterais que l'éducation des filles et des femmes, c'est la clé qui ouvre toutes les portes.
This mission remains the same for the present African Union CIEFFA staff.
Girls' education, particularly in Africa, is a very important and necessary issue. It's a strategic way to ensure that girls receive opportunities and there is equitable opportunities. And I think it's important to also stretch the conversation a little bit to include access to quality education. I believe that it's one of the fast ways in which girls and women can be included in the equitable participation politically, socioculturally, economically.
For me, girls' education is a kind of pathway for economic empowerment for that girl. And in our society, it's always saying when a girl is educated, she's getting a chance to be empowered. When she's empowered, she would then make sure that her daughter goes to school. And it's also help it's a continuity for the next generation.
AU CIEFFA's work is guided by policy frameworks like the SDG Goal 4, the AU Agenda 2063, both the Continental Education Strategy for Africa, the CESA, and the Gender Equality Strategy for CESA, developed by the African Union CIEFFA and the Forum for African Women Educationalists, FAWE. Other policy frameworks include the UN Transforming Education Summit, the high-level side event on transforming education in Africa, and the Dakar Declaration on assessing learning losses to embrace learning recovery for African girls.
Ce que nous faisons au niveau de l'Union Africaine CIEFFA, c'est de travailler avec les États membres. Et je vous ai mentionné tout à l'heure la communauté des experts de l'Union Africaine CIEFFA. Donc nous travaillons déjà bien sûr sous le leadership, comme je l'ai dit, de notre commissaire, avec les États membres qui, à travers les différentes rencontres, font des partages d'expériences sur les success stories et puis également les différents défis. L'autre travail que nous faisons est bien sûr toujours avec une partie prenante pour nous, ce sont les jeunes avec lesquels nous travaillons pour en faire des champions en matière d'éducation des filles et des femmes dans leur communauté. Le troisième travail que nous faisons, évidemment, bien sûr, avec les partenaires au développement, particulièrement la société civile, parce que nous ne pouvons pas faire ce travail-là seul.
Africa has made significant strides over the last few decades. At the primary level, just 44% of girls were completing their education 22 years ago. In 2020, that figure had risen to 66% and had even overtaken the rate for boys in some countries. Many more African countries boast of parity in access and completion at primary and lower secondary levels. This is thanks to the diversity and consistency of efforts from different stakeholders across the board, from UN agencies to CSOs to development partners.
We've walked a journey with the AU CIEFFA for the past many years in ensuring that there's gender equity and gender equality in education. AU CIEFFA and FAWE co-chairs the Women and Girls Education Cluster at the African Union. And because of this strong partnership, we have been able, for instance, to work on the gender equality strategy to ensure that there is a framework that guides member countries in terms of planning and implementing activities at country level and making sure that gender is at the center of every level of planning.
We are collaborating very closely on a range of topics. We just released 2 or 3 months ago the first African Teachers Report on the role of teachers and school leaders in educating girls and ending child marriage. We are working together also on 2 projects which are funded by the government of Japan. One is specifically about girls' education in West Africa, and the other one is a bit broader about mental health and psychosocial support for teachers, including women teachers, in context of emergencies. I have worked with the CIEFFA for quite a few years, including when I was still at the World Bank. In 2018, we produced together a report on girls' education and child marriage in Africa. So I'm very, very happy that we have this strong collaboration. I think CIEFFA is really a great center for the African Union.
The hindrances to access, retention, and achievement of girls in learning environments are still very much present. From sociocultural to political, environmental, economic, and psychological barriers, there is still much to be done to ensure complete gender equality in and through education.
One of the statistics say that there are 16.7 million out-of-school girls in sub-Saharan Africa, and then 9.3 million of those girls will never set foot in a class. And there are so many and diverse reasons that girls are not going to school in Africa. Because usually people think that in Africa, the reasons are similar, which is not the case. From each country to another country, you will see different reasons that. And those reasons we usually like to say that they're linked to social norms, they're linked to economic or financial reasons, they're linked to political instability reasons. But we need to go beyond those general or generic reasons.
Girls and women face an array of challenges, preventing them from accessing, remaining, and thriving in schools and the educational system. From issues around security in and out of school, sexual and gender-based violence, forced and early marriages, harmful cultural norms and practices including female genital mutilation, poverty and lack of resources, poor menstrual hygiene, and lack of wash facilities. This list continues. Meaningful interventions at the policy level must equally address these underlying causes which prevent our girls to a complete and successful trajectory in the system, in the educational system.
The road is still long and the workload cumbersome. But the hope and the goal are that 20 years from now, the narrative on girls and women's education will not only be completely revolutionized, but Africa will count a significant number of educated, fulfilled, successful, and empowered girls and women. These will work for the development of Africa's economic, political, and socio-cultural landscape. Africa educates her.